Okay, the exam is not cumulative, right? There will not be any detailed questions about prior module topics like Amazon or Google. However, insofar as all the course material does build on itself, right? I would certainly expect students to have a basic understanding of relational versus NoSQL databases, for example, and be able to mention them in exam questions without further explanation. Okay, so I won't ask you for detailed stuff, but obviously the basics at this point, you should be familiar enough with all that that I shouldn't have to say more. Okay, let's see, we may have a question here. Can you guys hear me? All right, yeah, if you can't hear me, you should probably pop out and pop back in. That seems to fix it most of the time. Okay, I know it's a small crowd, but I figure between all of us, we should be able to get at least a question or two. I don't know. All right, well, second thing. Historically, students tend to do best on this exam, right? Could be maybe because they are desperate and fearful and decide to study. I don't know. Desperate. How did I do that? Desperate. Okay. Maybe the material is just easier, right? Maybe the material or the exam. I don't think so, but yeah, maybe. Or maybe it's because many concepts are starting to repeat by now, right? There's a lot of things about YouTube that are similar to one or more of the previous, you know, Amazon, Google, Facebook, whatever. So I don't know. I don't know, but what I'm saying is, so don't panic, you know, just go in, try your best, all that. And remember, so I get a fair number of post-exam comments from people. You know, they're going through the exam and they're like, oh, I thought, you know, the question meant this, or yeah, at first I thought this, and then I thought about it some more, and then I picked the wrong answer. So the exams are detail-oriented because IDS is detail-oriented. That's just life, right? Like computer programming, one small error will make your code unusable, right? If there's a typo in there, the computer can't figure that out. So, you know, IDS stuff, all this, the systems are more complicated than you might see in other courses. You're not just going to learn a simple process like you would say in finance with CAPM or something. It's not like that. It's a different creature. But there are no trick questions, okay? I'm not trying to fool anyone on the exams. So, for example, there was a question. What was that? Now I don't remember. There was a question about I don't remember. But there aren't any trick questions on the exam, right? If the question looks kind of simple, you know, and you think about what the different detail parts mean, yeah, that's what they mean. Let me see. I do happen to have an exam here, so I can take a second to flip through it and see. Although this might not be the same version. I don't know. Well, I mean, people don't really have. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it was a question about the distinction between spam blogs and clickbait, right? And one of the options on the clickbait question was clickbait, unlike spam blogs, clickbait sometimes has interesting content or often has interesting content. And the student was like trying to puzzle out in his head like what percentage often meant. And I didn't mean it with that level of intensity. It was just like, yeah, clickbait stuff, right? It's junky, but at least it's, usually potentially interesting or something. It's something that has actual content, right? As opposed to a spam blog, which is just a bunch of ads and a bunch of nonsense jumbled words together that don't mean anything. So you see a question like that, again, I'm not trying to fool anybody, right? When I say often, if, you had asked me, I would have said like sometimes, but if there's a person who's going to puzzle over the word often, they're going to puzzle over sometimes too, you know? Anyway, so yeah, I'm not trying to fool anybody, but students often do overthink these things. Okay, they get caught up in puzzling over details, and yeah, so if you have a question, you should ask. There's usually time for that. I mean, most of the students finish the exam kind of early and they walk out. So like if you wanted to come down wherever I am and say, ask a question about, yeah, ask a question. Okay. All right. And I guess the last thing, semester grades, right? I don't know what the curve will be exactly. So there's not much point asking, right? Until the day I have to submit course grades, which is Wednesday after finals week. Okay, whenever that's done, I submit the grade. I wake up Wednesday morning sometime and I say, oh shit, I got to do the grades. And I do all the grades for all my courses and I figure out what the curve's going to be. And I go into our system called Banner and I type in all the grades for everybody. There they go, right? And then hopefully you see them shortly afterward. It's been a while since I was a student and had to worry about when grades appear. So, honestly, I don't know. But I feel like they probably show up the same day or a day or two later because that's when I start to get emails about them. I don't post the grades to Blackboard. Because why? Because that would be really unnecessary work, right? When I have a lot of it takes like an hour or something. And then there's again the potential for mistakes. So yeah, that's a thing. And students do ask about, the exact cutoffs. So I'm going to make one more note here. And this will, I guess, eventually all get put out as an announcement on Blackboard in some form. I don't immediately reveal the grade cutoffs. Anybody want to guess why I don't immediately reveal the grade cutoffs? I want to guess. What's that? Yeah, because there'll be a lot of grubbing at the end, right? There'll be a line of students outside my office saying, "Oh, professor, I was just like a couple points short. Isn't there anything you could do?" I was like, "Yeah, there's stuff I could do. I'm just not going to do it." So reason is I don't immediately reveal the grade cutoffs because that would tend to provoke a long series of failed grubbing operations, right? And I really don't want to have people waste their time doing this and make a special trip to campus or something. No, okay? So unfortunately, some students must have the highest B in their sections. That's life, okay? Sorry, no matter where I make the cutoff, somebody's going to have the highest B. So at some point, I got to draw the line and say, this is it. If you really, really, really want to know, right? If like the Spice Girls, like you really, really, really want to know the cutoffs, you are welcome to arrange an in-person visit in January after the semester break. Because by that time, right? And then, you know, you stop on by, I'll tell you what the cutoffs were. And you can be like, oh, I was a couple points short, or, oh, I was in the middle of the range, I was nowhere near the cutoff, right? I mean, I'll give you a ballpark number. I'll tell people, you know, you just made it, or you were in the middle, or yeah, you were pretty close, but not quite there. But I'm not going to give people exact cutoffs because of the grubbing issue. But again, if you really want to know afterward and you want to say, hey, just making sure, was there any, you know, mistake in my computation? Because, you know, Joe, I think, got a 640 and got a C, and I had a 641 and I got a D. You know, yeah, maybe there was a mistake, or maybe, you know, more in the vast majority. I'm not saying there's never been a mistake, but in the vast majority of cases, it's that the grade computations have somehow been flawed, like people did the percentages wrong or something. Anyway, okay, so if you really want to know, yeah, stop by in January. I'll tell you if you think there's been a mistake, that's fine. Okay? So again, not trying to hide anything from this, but I got 500 students. I can't be dealing with the, because like 20% of the class is going to be close to a cutoff. I can't have that kind of, I can't have 200 students like all trying to squeeze out a few points. It's not good. Okay. So I don't know. Does anybody have any questions on anything? This is, I mean, I guess it. Yeah. It is kind of variable by TAs, but obviously, since the policy is to have all the disputes done by next Friday, my sincere hope is that all of the homework and everything will be graded by the end of this weekend. All right, so that's what I'm going to push for. I'm going to send out a thing, because you guys ought to have time to check that, right? Yeah. And if there's an issue with that, then we can follow up and whatever. Oh yeah, you were one of the two at my office. Both of you guys, you were the two at my office yesterday, weren't you? We stopped by. Okay, no, you were though. Yeah, sorry, I can't remember everybody who's everybody. Anyway, one last thing. There was a mistake in the grading key on one of the exam versions that triggered my, and I looked at it. I have all the things. So there's going to be a handful of students. They get like 5 bonus points. There's going to be, because, or 4 bonus points, because, you know, one question. And there's going to be a couple students that lose 5. The vast majority of the students, you know, did not either get the wrong answer, the wrong correct answer that the answer key had, or, you know, the one that was correct. So I guess it was a difficult question. But yeah, there are a few people. You may see your grade on the exam change by 1 question worth, and most of those changes are going to be a bump upward. But it's like 10 people total out of like 300. So I don't know what happened with that question. A lot of people missed it. Okay, nothing? No questions on any of this stuff? Okay. Well, just like the popcorn pops, I mean, I guess that's it. If the bag is empty, if you do have questions about stuff, you know, and you want to stop by the 12:30 section, whatever, there will be a 12:30, you know, Q&A session, and I'll post both of them up on YouTube. They'll be available, so if you want to check out that. But I mean, if there's no questions, I don't want to just sit here and stare awkwardly at everyone for a while. Nothing? Do you guys know I play Scrabble? Anybody know that I Scrabble? You do? People know this? Wow. Okay. Well, I'll show you something neat. I Scrabble, right? And not just that, you know, oh, I can move the tiles. I'm actually pretty good. But I played in a little tournament last weekend, and I was kind of excited because I hit a milestone. So this is me. It was out in Elmhurst, and there I am. And if you look at the stuff, right? So yeah, I mean, I won it, but whatever. I was also the top ranked guy in there. But over here, my new rating, 1900, shiny new. That's the first time I hit 1900. If I go back and I look at this, if I were like active, which I'm not, but if I were, 1900 would place me. I would bump out Cecilia Lee here, who's a nice lady. I've met her. I would bump her out, and I'd be number 28 in North America. So that's kind of cool. I Scrabble. Yeah. I mean, I also play Fortnite and I play chess, but I do Scrabble. Scrabble's kind of my thing. All right. I don't know. It was just like some happy news. Anybody got anything good to share? I also found a lost coffee mug that I was very sad that I lost, because it's like one of my favorites. Then I found it. It was in the basement. So I don't know. That's all I got then. Last call. Going once. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, that depends. I mean, I didn't really say that it makes them arrive out of order. Uh, yeah, I mean that's a possible. I mean, it's not an inherent thing. So let me go to the slides and see what they actually are, because yeah, it is a possibility, right? So one thing you got to, and that would be within quality of service. One thing you got to remember, right? Because I hadn't talked into TCP or UDP much at that point. So remember, TCP, everything's going to follow the same routing path. Everything's going to be sequential. So if some packets arrive early or some packets arrive late, they're still going to arrive in or if some packets are slow and some packets are not slow, everything's still going to be in sequence, right? So that's not going to make things arrive out of order. With UDP, if packets are going down different paths, right? Still, if at any given, right, what happens with UDP is every packet goes down what is considered to be the locally best path, right? So as far as the system knows and guesses at that particular instant in time, it's going to try to send that packet down that best path. Now, it could be with UDP that all packets still go down the same path, right? In which case they're going to arrive sequentially, because even if there's jitter, same as TCP, right? They're still going to arrive sequentially. Just there's going to be temporary interruptions in the flow. But if they take different paths, and some paths are suffering from severe jitter, and other paths, you know, the packets are zip, 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 they're going right along with no delays, then yeah, of course they can arrive out of order. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, like I said, jitter is not automatically inherently going to make things arrive out of order, but under the right circumstances, that is a possible consequence. All right, so let me see exactly what I have here in the slides. Yeah, so can make transmissions arrive out of order, right? And again, that's really only going to work that way for UDP, and only under certain circumstances there. Cool. Anything else? Yeah. Oh, well, number one, it could, and for some systems it surely does. But there's a few reasons. So why doesn't YouTube use NoSQL systems? Why do they use, you mean, I assume the question is, why does YouTube use a relational database system, Vitess, as opposed to a NoSQL, something like a key value store system, right? That's the question? Give you a little detail. Yeah, okay. So there's a few reasons. Number one, all right, so we'll talk about advantages of key value not important here, okay? The main advantage of a key value system is that it uses storage capacity very efficiently, right? Not like a relational database where all the fields have to be the same size, have the same capacity, where a field has to permit, it's choosing the words carefully, has to reserve the same size for each record, but the records might not require that much, right? So imagine if you were storing entire videos in a record. Some of the videos are going to be short and simple. Some of the videos are going to be long and, you know, require a lot of data to store, right? You have some 2-hour high definition movie, it's going to be a couple gigs there, right? Others might just be like a meg or two. But if you're going to say every record has to allow for this 2 gig slug of data, then you're going to have a lot of empty space in your database, right? Because every record is going to have to allow 2 gigs of space for that video field. That's one of the things that relational databases do, is every field, you know, is offset by the same amount within a record. Makes it easy to find stuff. But for YouTube, videos are segmented in a fairly uniform size within a table, right? And again, this is kind of YouTube special sauce. We don't have a whole lot of detail about how they do it, but if you can imagine, they have like one table full of low resolution video segments, another table full of, you know, sort of low video resolution segments, another one sort of medium. And within that table, those segments are all going to be about the same size, right? So the fact that within a record, that field has to be the same size, it is not a terrible disadvantage, right? It's not going to be 100% as exact great as NoSQL, because there's still going to be some small variation, but the utilization is probably going to still be very high, okay? So the advantage of NoSQL database in this key value store would be the ability to store the data efficiently in terms of not needing to buy as much storage media, basically not needing to buy as much disk space. That's going to help, but it's not too relevant because of the way YouTube stores videos as segments. The other thing, disadvantages of key value are important here, okay? Basically, the thing is, users will often want to jump ahead to the middle or end of a video, right? And if YouTube stored videos as complete, files and delivered them that way, number one, it would be difficult to know, because of compression, exactly where the middle of the video is, right? Could have much compression at the start or at the end, right? So if suppose you have some big 2 gig slug of data and it's all just stored as one single unit, right? But some of it's going to be compressed. We know YouTube stores this stuff compressed because it doesn't want to take the time to compress the video prior to sending it. Because the data is stored in some kind of compressed format, when somebody says, oh, I want to jump ahead to like 58 minutes into this 2-hour video, YouTube would basically have to unpack the video, figure out where that 58 minutes is, then do the rest of it, right? The other thing, of course, and YouTube doesn't want to store the videos as complete files anyway, or it doesn't want to store and deliver them as complete files. Sorry. Because that would take a lot of time before the playback could start, right? So if you say, well, yeah, we're storing all these things on our systems and they're complete and it's a little bit more efficient in storage, but in order to start the video playing, I have to deliver you the whole file, and it's like a 2-hour video, that's going to take a little while, and that's going to kind of suck because you just want to start playing the video right away, right? Even if they do it with segments, it still doesn't fully resolve. Imagine if the segments are like 10 minutes or something. So yeah, these problems aren't going to be as bad, but they still are going to be problems. And you're not gaining any real advantage from doing it that way. You just basically would have to create an extra list of, oh, with our current compression format, here's where like 15 seconds is, here's where 30 seconds is. You'd have to do something like that, and it'd be an extra chunk of work for no real advantage, right? The last thing, also, YouTube does require some join operations for queries involving multiple tables, right? Like artist plus, I don't know, year or something like that. If you want to say, show me the batch of Spice Girls songs from 1997 or something, right? That's a query that could potentially involve multiple tables depending on how things are sorted, right? Or if you want to ask for, show me all the videos that have been, I don't know, posted by Laserbeam, right? The list of users or list of accounts is going to be in one table, list of videos is going to be another. You might have to do some kind of cross query thing there. Anyway, stuff like that, it does require some join operations. And generally, join operations are really slow and inefficient for key value stores because you're not sure whether each record has those fields. You have to actually go in and check, and you have to scan through the entire record to find them. Now, you could do some kind of custom key value store that somewhat obviates that. You could have like a design policy that says, yeah, every key value store is going to start with these fields. But again, that's another chunk of work you have to do that you wouldn't have to do if you just used a relational database in the first place. Yeah? All right. So that's, way more detail than you would need on the exam. But if you understand all that and remember all that, the exam questions will be pretty trivial in regard to that. Okay? Cool. Other stuff? Yeah. Yeah. So Dash is a system, well, you can say it's a protocol for delivering the right size video segments, okay, based on buffer and connection speed. So, imagine that you are watching some video in high resolution, highest resolution, 4K or whatever, and suddenly you lose connection quality. All right, you walk behind a big wall, there's like a 10 feet of lead and concrete between you and the router, and your connection drops to practically nothing. Okay? So, what happens? Well, YouTube, above all, wants to keep playing the video, even if it's in greatly reduced quality. The big thing is it doesn't want the playback to stop, right? It wants to keep going the video. YouTube has made a policy decision that most people are more concerned with watching the video continuously rather than having perfect quality plus interruptions, okay? Because YouTube knows that's what people like mostly. So YouTube or Dash, right? Dash will check how much buffer you have, and based on your connection speed, figure out what size video segment it can send without depleting the buffer too much. Okay, so it might say that, well, yeah, there's like 1 minute of the buffer, and based on what we guess, it'll take about exactly a minute to deliver this next segment. I mean, at that point, that kind of puts YouTube in a high-risk situation, right? It says, oh, yeah, if things go well, great, we just exactly exhaust the buffer. But if anything is a little bit off, if the connection gets a little bit worse, then the video grinds to a halt, which we definitely don't want, right? So it's going to consider the buffer. Well, don't get into details about whether it's going to fully exhaust it or not. It's going to look at the buffer, and the more buffer that the browser has stored, it's going to allow for a larger video segment size, right? But in general, it doesn't want to fully deplete the buffer, but it might say, whatever. And anyway, and maybe based on that, it will send you a much lower quality segment, right? Because the connection speed is slowed down. If the connection recovers, then with low quality segments, the buffer will also recover, right? Because if your connection speed allows a gig of data per minute and the video segments you're pulling are only taking like 10 megs of data per minute, right? Obviously that buffer is going to substantially bump up pretty quickly. So if the connection speed recovers, the buffer is going to start recover and get bigger, and YouTube, and Dash will eventually recognize that and start sending high quality segments again. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah, that's what Dash does. Okay, so basically the video segment quality, Dash is going to look and see what your connection can support, how much damage it's going to do to the buffer if it tries to send you a bigger segment than can probably be sent. If your buffer gets too depleted, it's definitely going to go to a much lower segment, might go to a lower segment anyway, right? We don't have to have all the precise details about how Dash works, but basically what it's going to do is going to fit your video segment quality to whatever your system capacity is at that point in order to keep the video playing continuously. That's the override. That's the big picture. Other stuff? All right. Going once. Going twice. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Well, think about it for a second. What's the definition of a tier one network? What are the requirements to be a tier one network? If you don't know, that's okay, but I did mention them. There's one very defining thing about a tier one network. Yeah, there's a substantial backbone ownership requirement, right? And what do we know about the backbone? Is the backbone like a crappy 1990s copper cable, or is it super fancy high capacity fiber optic cable? That one, correct. And what do we know about super fancy high capacity fiber optic cable besides that it's kind of expensive? It's high capacity, right? It sends a lot of data. So if you have a system like that where you have two tier one networks that are managing a lot of fiber optic cable and therefore sending a lot of data, it's going to be a lot of work to track exactly which data is being sent by where and charge people for it, right? It's going to be a lot of work to do that. But the assumption in most cases that's pretty valid is that for every packet going one way, there's going to be a packet going the other way, right? Just like the mail system between the US and France, right? So it's easier to just say, yeah, we'll send data for you, you send data for us, it'll work out. Long term, if there's a major flow imbalance one way or the other, we can talk about some restitution plans. But in the short term, yeah, we're just going to send data for you. We're not going to charge you. Yeah? And, I mean, that's the way the system is supposed to work, right? I talk in the slides, I mentioned that like one of the things like with Netflix inherently designs imbalanced traffic flows, right? Because a small request generates a whole streaming video, right? And so, yeah, there's definitely some system, and like Comcast really kind of rode that wave to, yeah. So imbalances do happen. And again, long term, they have to figure out some kind of contract, how they're going to deal with that kind of problem. But in the short term, they're still just going to send data for free. It's like with the US and France and the postal system. If over a decade, France notices that it's getting a lot more mail from the US than France is sending back to the US, France at some point is going to say, hey guys, come on, you got to give us something for the trouble. And the US government, postal service, whatever, they'll probably say, yeah, okay, let's work something out, right? But they're not going to check that closely every day. Yeah. All right, so that's what, and the other ones, right? Like the tier three ISPs, they get money straight from the customers, right? You pay your internet provider, and then they have that money. A chunk of that goes to pay any tier two providers, right? So if you're sending email or whatever around the country, then yeah, the part of your tier three provider has to pay the tier two provider to send it. Now, generally, tier two providers are not typically connected directly to other tier two providers. That's one of the things why it's kind of skipped over in the slides. The whole internet is basically set up as a tree. So you go from a tier three to a tier two to a tier one if you need to. Now there can be some weird situations where, yeah, two tier two connect, you might do that, but it's unusual. Yeah. Because if something has to go to the back, if something can be handled locally, it's handled locally. But if something can't be handled locally, it goes up to the backbone and then back down. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All righty. Anything else? All right. Cool. Well, it's been a hoot. I hope you all do, well on the final. I imagine the people who show up for class always tend to do substantially better than the rest of the class who doesn't. So there's that. Yeah. And I guess we have, there are the whole, student evaluation things. Oh, anyway, well, what I usually say most semesters, what I say is if you've enjoyed the class or found something, interesting or useful, whatever, please, go in and write a nice review for me. And if you haven't enjoyed the class and found it to be just a complete nightmare, then, just remember that writing those course evaluations is a lot of work and you probably can think of something more fun to do with your time. So I used to say that, but I just got my promotion like last year, and so I'm not super worried about any of that stuff, and I'm probably not going to really even chase the last promotion tier because I'm not that far away from retirement, and at my age, I'm very cognizant that life is short, so I'd rather hang out with my kids and play Fortnite or Minecraft or shit than write a bunch of academic papers that hardly anybody's going to read. So whatever. I hope you enjoyed it, but if you didn't, you're going to do what you're going to do. So anyway, good luck out there, and who knows, maybe I'll see you in a future course, or you'll see me. Yes. I teach a bunch. You guys haven't seen my LinkedIn profile? Hold on, I got a thing here. This might be a thing. Yeah, I teach a bunch. So, whoa, what happened? That's freaky. There we go. That was really weird. Thank you, sir. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I teach a bunch. So if you want, I'll take a moment. These are the things I teach and in the sequence I teach them. So obviously I teach IDS 200. You all should know that by now. Downstream of that, I teach IDS 201, which is basically Java programming. And so if you're interested in how to code or possibly being an IDS major, this is a difficult but valuable course because number one, everything you code after that will probably be easy. So, it front loads the pain and misery. But number two, if you're an IDS major, you should have some familiarity with coding because it's a possible, career option. Downstream of that, there's also IDS 313, which is Internet Applications in Business. But this is basically JavaScript. We do like 5 weeks of JavaScript, 5 weeks of PHP, which is that server-side scripting, and a little bit of network architecture and stuff. So some of these more technical things I've talked about, like routing, switching, stuff like that is what we talk about in there. On occasion, like in summers, I teach IDS 4.1, which is intermediate Java. I mean, I taught it for a few years, and then they had me do other things, and so that's fine. So intermediate Java, and then if any of you ever go on to do masters here, I teach a web analytics course, but it's entirely possible that course will no longer exist by the time you guys are doing a master's. But yeah, short answer, I do teach other stuff. Okay, yeah. So like I said, maybe if some of you become IDS majors, I might see you at some point down the road. All right. Anyway, it's been a hoot. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the break. All that good stuff. Yep.